Hi, I'm Richard. I'm the bacteriology lab manager and I work for Public Health Wales. I'm based in the regional lab in Singleton Hospital in Swansea, and we process all of the microbiology samples for Singleton, Neath Talbot, Morriston and the Princess of Wales hospitals in Bridgend and all of the surrounding GPs. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Let me tell you a story about a gentleman called Tom who was sent to accident and emergency department following a visit to his GP. Tom arrived in A&E at around midday. Tom is a 76-year-old male with a history of gout, and on the 27th of February, Tom presented with an acute swollen left elbow with redness and pain. Tom was seen in triage after 2 hours, where an orthopaedic consultant was present. Blood tests and an elbow aspirate were required to rule out septic arthritis or gout. The samples were taken at triage, and Tom was accompanied in A&E by his wife and daughter, who over the next 12 hours tried to chase the results of the sample several times without success. The ward staff noted that the laboratory was taking a long time to turn around the test. A&E was particularly busy, with many patients waiting to be seen, admitted, or just waiting on tests. After 12 hours, Tom's son, who was working away in Liverpool at the time, called to see what the delay was. After a 14-hour wait, Tom was discharged from A&E as the lab tests had finally come back and a diagnosis of gout was recorded. Tom later went on to develop COVID for the first time, which he attributed to his visit to A&E. Tom is in the high-risk category and thankfully was able to access antivirals and made a full recovery after isolating away from his family for a further 14 days. Unfortunately, his wife also contracted COVID for the first time at day 16, but also went on to make a full recovery following a further 12-day isolation period. So here's the twist. Tom's story is personal to me, as Tom is my father. Just before midday, I made a telephone call to say farewell to my parents before I boarded my train to Liverpool. I heard my parents were on their way to A&E after a visit to the GP, who was concerned for my father. They hadn't informed me as they didn't want to trouble me and knew that I was going to be working away. I decided to board the train and reassess when I reached Cardiff. Whilst at Cardiff, I made another call to my father, who reassured me that he was okay. I boarded my connection and I headed to Liverpool. Throughout that day, I made contact with my father several times to see what the diagnosis was. He hadn't been informed of the results and anecdotally had been told that the lab was taking a very long time. Being in a unique position of son and lab manager, I knew this was extremely unusual. I was part of the design and management of the service, whilst also experiencing the impact of the service on my family. Through experience, I knew that either the sample had already been processed and the result hadn't been accessed, or the sample had gone missing, or finally the sample was still in A&E. After 12 hours and a conversation with my manager, who was also with me in Liverpool at the time, I decided to make a few phone calls. The first call that I made was to the on-call bacteriology BMS to see if she'd been informed of the sample or if it had indeed been processed. I noted I didn't want to know the result and explained that this was my father's sample. I was reassured and also very impressed when I was reminded by my team that under no circumstances was she able to give me the result. I was informed that the lab had received a call to process the aspirate urgently many hours ago, and several chaser calls had been made to A&E, but the sample had not yet arrived. My next call was to biochemistry, as this was another possible mid-transit location for the sample. It wasn't there either. The last call was to Porters to see if the sample was somewhere mid-transit. It wasn't, and they confirmed that they hadn't had a call about it. So my final call was to A&E. After explaining to the receptionist that I was the lab manager and also Tom's son, I asked to speak to the nurse who had been assigned to my father. At this stage there wasn't one, so I was passed to the nurse in charge. The nurse in charge was very helpful and started the conversation by apologising many times, letting me know how busy they were with over 140 patients being seen. I explained I wasn't calling to complain, but to offer some help. I explained the sample was either still somewhere on the ward or had been lost, in which case merely waiting wasn't going to help my father. I suggested that if the sample had been lost, a decision likely needed to be made on the blood results which they confirmed that they had received, or that the orthopaedic consultant would need to be called to re-aspirate my father's elbow. The nurse said that she could see a lot of samples, approximately 30 had just left to go to the lab, and that she would sort it. There was, however, some miscommunication about where the sample would be processed and how it would get there. We ended our call and I started to think about what I could do to help make this better for other patients. Within an hour, the BMS on call had received my father's sample, processed it, and a diagnosis had been made, and my fatigued father has been discharged at 2:30 a.m. Pondering on what had happened, I wondered how good our communication methods between lab and wards are. I'd also realised that once the sample was taken, the rest of the process was little understood by staff. But how would they? Would improving that knowledge make the process better? Our laboratories are run by teams of scientists, support workers, administrative staff and medics. Biomedical scientists are hidden professionals who work in healthcare laboratories diagnosing disease and evaluating the effectiveness of treatments. They've been described by the Institute of Biomedical Scientists as providing the engine room of modern medicine, with approximately 70% of diagnoses in the NHS based on pathology results provided by the laboratory services. The bacteriology lab in Singleton processes approximately 250,000 samples per year. Every person at some point in their lives will benefit from the services of a biomedical scientist. As a profession, I feel that we need to reach out to those using our services to see if we can improve our systems by working in collaboration. Approximately 40% of emergency admissions are attributed to bacterial infections. I then wondered if a biomedical support worker with knowledge of lab processes, not just bacteriology, but also cross-trained in laboratory medicine, with a knowledge of the full repertoire of tests on site in A&E, would make the flow of samples better. Someone with a specialist knowledge of tests, sample containers, and lab flow. Perhaps working in triage as a point of contact to work alongside the nursing staff. The support worker could have access to electronic test requesting, which makes the flow of the sample much more streamlined when it arrives in the laboratory. The support worker could communicate directly to see how urgent the sample was, maybe even colour coding the pods depending on their priority. This colour code could then dictate the flow of the sample when it reaches the laboratory. Joining up these two elements seems to make sense. At A&E, the support worker could inform staff when the sample result was ready, through the laboratory information management system. I wondered if a sample may be ready for the first meeting between medic and patient, potentially discharging patients more quickly. I wasn't aware if this had been trialled elsewhere, and to my knowledge, I don't think that it has. In my father's case, this would certainly have improved his outcome and experience. I have source funding to trial this approach, and I'm currently in discussions to see if this is possible. Laboratories are assessed and accredited by the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, which are appointed by government. Laboratories are currently in transition period, which is a 3-year period, to a new set of standards. By the end of this period, laboratories accredited to ISO 15189-2012 worldwide must have been assessed and accredited to ISO 15189-2022. The key updates to the standard includes a greater focus on clinical risk and the impact of services on patients. At a laboratory level, the period before a sample is received is referred to as the pre-analytical phase. I realised that my dad's brief illness allowed me a window into the impact of the pre-analytical phase of my service. Other areas where our laboratory are currently reaching out to make quality improvements are in processing of blood cultures and also retrieval of Neisseria gonorrhea at our sexual health clinics. At our clinics, we train nurses to inoculate plates directly. This has improved our recovery of gonococcus threefold. This allows us to monitor treatment therapy choices, respond to any resistance forming in this cohort of patients. Our ongoing blood culture pathway improvement project is in its infancy. According to the Sepsis Trust, every 3 seconds, someone in the world dies of sepsis. A focus on improving this pre-analytical phase is also suggested by UCAS, with an aim of improved rates of detection, improved patient outcomes, reduced length of stay, and improved antimicrobial stewardship. We're looking to relocate our analyzers to be based near our patients to increase the likelihood of early detection of pathogens. We're also looking at ways to educate users about the best fill volume. Value-based healthcare describes the importance of stewardship of resources across the whole system. A joined-up approach allowing the pre-analytical phase of a sample to flow seamlessly into the analytical phase will allow us, as guardians of those resources, to get best value for our efforts. If there are any opportunities in your areas whereby involvement with microbiology colleagues may improve outcomes for patients, please let us know, as we're really keen to work with you to improve the outcomes of the patients that we serve. Thank you.